actually captured me from the very beginning in the book was when you actually write about cigarette companies or tobacco companies, because that hit me really hard, because I've been trying to say this to my children. I see this in myself, but I'm seeing it in my kids even more because they're digital natives. But it's crept up around me, where my kids were little. I would do dishes and I would have the computer on with some TV show that I could watch, or when smartphones came around, I was doing that. And then you wonder why your kids are doing it. And I'm watching them, seeing it amplified even further than it is in me. And it's really starting to bother me. And so I'm always yelling at them like, this is bad, this is bad. But when you presented it this way, comparing it to tobacco companies, it hit me. I want you, for our audience, to just elaborate on why you brought that out, the digital smoke, analog air, and fruit. I mean, you really set the stage with that there, and I know you've alluded to it already, but bring that out further if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. I tell a story about, in the 1940s, about 40% of American adults smoked cigarettes, at least socially, many of them regularly. Now, that number, that percentage, is down to around 10%, 10 to 12% today. So you think about just the seismic drop off in how many adults regularly smoke cigarettes. And the main reason for that is because health science in the last 75 years has shown us, smoking tobacco cigarettes is actually bad for your health. They didn't really, I mean, they were aware, but it wasn't as like a widely held, sort of agreed upon truth at the time, 75, 80 years ago. So I talk about Camel cigarettes. They hired a company called the William S.D. Advertising Agency to develop an ad campaign to sort of create an uptick in cigarette sales for Camel. And the William S.D. Ad Agency came up with what is now an iconic advertising campaign called More Doctors. And you can Google images of this. They took out full page ads in magazines and newspapers and billboards where they would have images of doctors smoking Camel cigarettes. And the tagline would be, "More doctors smoke Camels." And it worked. I mean, Camel sales spiked actually significantly after that. And it's because people thought, doctors smoke Camel cigarettes. Camel cigarettes must be good for my health. That was what people were inferring. And I share that story because today we look at ads like that and we think they're laughable. We're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that worked, but it did. And I share it only to say, I do wonder if 10, 20, 50 years from now, future generations will look back on us today and think it was laughable that we put these black boxes in the back pockets of 12-year-olds, like it was nothing. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he said, if somebody wakes up in the morning and the first thing they do every morning is go open a bottle of beer and have a drink, we would call them alcoholics. If somebody woke up in the morning and the first thing they did was snort a line of Coke, we would call them cocaine addicts. But if the first thing somebody does when they wake up every morning is open their phone and scroll their feeds, we call them Americans. We've normalized our addiction, right? But I mean, just think about it clearly and plainly. We are addicts. There's some data that says almost 90%, 87% of Americans, the first thing they do when they wake up, the first sort of conscious thing they do, outside of like going to the bathroom and stuff, is open their phones. So what are we? And I wonder if we're going to look back on this era in future years and just think, how in the world did we think that this was normal and acceptable? So that was the point I was trying to make with that story. And I still think about it often. I really do think future generations are going to look at us and say, how in the world did they live that way?